Alright guys, we've got TiKevin83 here with Hwangbro,
Hello, hello.
and we are going to be doing a live playback of the Pokemon Yellow Theory TAS of the route currently hosted by Wave Warrior and his Pastebin. It's updated for the latest reroute with Ice Beam, so... Ooh. Something is not right. Because it just... Oh, you know what? It must have, like, detached itself from TAS Studio. Let me try that again. Wouldn't be a TAS stream without technical difficulties. There we go. Let's see how it's playing back now. That looks better. So yep, this is TiKevin83 here with Hwangbro from Pokemon Speedrunning.
Yep.
And we are doing a live playback and commentary of the Pokemon Yellow Theory TAS of the current route that uses Ice Beam. It's hosted on Wave Warrior's Pastebin. I'll turn on follow cursor here so you can see the input scroll by.
Yeah, this new route was sort of incepted maybe a few months ago after we used to use Blizzard in the route, and notably Pokeguy missed Blizzard, I think like 3 times in a row on Champion. And so after that many times, he was sick of missing Blizzard and got to work on routing Ice Beam in, and it turns out it's barely even slower than Blizzard, but it makes the route way safer and more consistent in the late game, so it's a very good improvement.
Yeah. I can still remember when Exarian did the reroute to Blizzard back in the day. And it was always an interesting decision tree because you need to either get Ice Beam early and find a place to teach it without losing too much time, or you can get Blizzard in the mansion and just pick it up and not have to go through all the dialogue with the drink girl.
Yep.
But yeah, with being on such a low experience route, it's so nice to be able to just not have to worry about the miss and the range on the champion fight.
Mm-hmm. Like the new Ice Beam route makes, like whether or not you get the 13 or 15 special Nidoran doesn't really matter at all. It's just mostly the same. One before on Blizzard route, it was a huge win rate difference on the champion fight especially.
Mm-hmm. It does have the downside, though, right, of not being able to do Vaporeon starts?
Not viably. You can make the route work, you have to make a lot of compromises that aren't really worth it if you're going for a top time.
Yeah. Hey, Big Bass. So this is where the real, like, task part of the run will start to be visible. So, normally you wouldn't be able to control the exact outcome of this fight, but by being in TAS, we can control exactly how much damage we take from Eevee, which is going straight from Pikachu's green bar to the red health bar, and then red barring the level up and learning the move on Pikachu, which saves 5 seconds. And because we crit Eevee twice, we won in 3 turns. And getting all of that at the same time in one run is very unlikely. But the idea here is just to give, like, a theory of what is the fastest thing that could possibly happen if you were playing following the human route.
Yeah, so unlike the others with the regular tasks, we're not going to be in red bar 100% of the time because a human doing the route wouldn't normally take risks where it's very likely for you to die if it's not really reliable for you to keep low HP all the time. So a lot of the time we're opting to actually not take any damage at all if it makes sense, and as opposed to staying in red bar all the time, because a human would heal out of red bar most of the time in these situations.
Yeah, the easiest way to explain it is just that the amount of time it would take to take the damage and then heal off the damage in most scenarios in this game outweighs the amount of time saved while sitting in red bar.
Yeah, so this is following the human route as well, so we're going to be walking through like the minimum number of grass tiles like a human would, whereas a normal TAS would just walk through all the grass tiles and just take the fastest route and just manipulate no encounters.
Yeah.
So this is basically just if a human played, making human decisions with TAS execution and relatively reasonable good luck. Or perfect luck, I guess.
Yeah. The only thing that's really excluded from, like, the perfect luck is Gen 1 misses. So there's scenarios like you could get an EQ Gen 1 miss on the champion. But I don't even know how good that is, because if you get EQ Gen 1 miss, then you're not in red bar.
Well, I would assume that the TAS would just enter the fight at low HP anyway, and...
Oh, yeah.
Yeah, so...
So I have a spreadsheet up now, because this time I've counted before the run the frame times at each split. So I think Poga Guy said the fastest Nidos they've had is like a 709, right?
I'm not sure if that sounds about right though. I think most of my fastest Nidos are around like low 710s, but I've never had like no encounter at one as like paired with like a crazy Rival 1 fight. So that sounds about right.
Yeah.
If you're saving a turn, 709.
Yeah, and this here is 704. So yeah, unlike the full TAS, we're going to have to reset to manipulate a Nidoran, because the full TAS doesn't need to reset its RNG to a constant state. Humans have to kind of like clear out the RNG to a state where it can be manipulated from.
Yep, so this Nidoran manip, it gives you a really good Nido, almost perfect Nido, around like 90% of the time. And around 10% of the time it gives either different wrong encounters or bad Nidorans. And the variance is due to the in-game timer of when you save has an effect on the type of Nidoran or the RNG that the game produces. So
Yes.
you save on a certain second and a certain frame. So there's 60 seconds in a minute, 60 frames in a second. So there's 3,600 unique sort of in-game time IGT values that can produce different results with the MIP.
Yep.
Yeah,
And
so walking through this grass here is actually not a yellow strat. Something that even humans are doing is that if you clear all the text boxes from the Nidoran manip perfectly, you can extend the manip and reliably walk through that grass without any encounters.
Exactly, and that's why so usually in RTA you want to menu in buildings because there's less lag when you're not in the overworld with menuing, but because we can track whether like a specific movement path to not getting any encounters walking up to the bug catcher, we delay the menu until after we've done that, because we can't play perfectly through the menu. And now in this fight, we are doing all of the Leer strats just like you would as a human, but we're getting string shot fails every turn from Caterpie, because for one, string shot fail is very fast for each turn compared to tackle turns, and then for 2, if we were tackled every turn, we'd have to eventually then heal off that tackle damage.
Yep, and then by also not getting hit with any string shots, we actually save either half a turn or one whole turn because we get the last turn first on the Caterpie without taking damage back on that turn. So it does save a little bit of time being faster than the Caterpie just inherently.
Yeah, it saves a whole turn of battle too on that first fight. But it's pretty rare. It's maybe happened to me like once that I've gotten 0 string shots all the way until the last turn.
Yep.
So with the input viewer, I've tried to visually show with like holding the inputs which ones are timed versus which inputs can actually be buffered.
Yeah, this fight is actually one of the biggest places where good or bad RNG can really affect your pace. This Metapod has 3 moves: String Shot, Tackle, and Harden. And if he spams Harden, it's just a really, really slow fight.
Yeah.
But if you get 2 String Shot fails like here, it's a really, really fast fight. So it's just a huge amount of variance that can happen in this fight.
Yeah, it's a really annoying fight because the fastest strategy from the outset is to use Leer, even though it has a chance to use Harden. And if you use Leer and it uses Harden, you're back to square one. So you can get caught in this loop of, okay, the fastest thing to do is Leer, it hardens. The fastest thing to do is Leer, it hardens.
Yeah, Stringflow, one of the more prominent PSR programmers, he ran simulations on this fight. And it's actually slightly faster to just spam horn attacks on the Metapod. Very, very, very slightly faster on average, but the cost is you just spend more horn attacks on that fight. So it's a trade-off that you have to think about as well.
Yeah, ultimately it might not be worth it even if it is like slightly faster because those horn attacks are so valuable.
Mm-hmm. Yeah,
and then,
so
we changed this. So like we redid the entire task twice. And one of the main reasons was because we wanted to get that potion. Because human runners would pick up that potion, buffering it after the end of the wild encounter.
Yeah, so when you manipulate the Pidgey-Catch and exit the overworld, you're exiting already facing up onto the tower where the hidden potion is, and because there's like music transition that happens when you're exiting the battle and entering the forest again, if you pick up the potion during this time, it actually skips the jingle that plays when you pick up the potion, which is like, I want to say like 2.5 or 3 seconds.
Yeah.
So it's just really, really fast to pick up that potion, and there's no reason not to for human runners.
Yeah, potions end up being super valuable even into the late game because you can use them to really precisely tune your HP and make it more or less likely to get red bar or to not die. I like to call this guy Lightyear Guy. I don't know what most people are calling him these days.
I think that's still his colloquial name, Lightyear Guy.
Yeah. But this fight is really interesting from a theory task perspective, because 31 HP going into this fight is so useful. You can take exactly the normal damage from every turn and end up in perfect red bar at the end of the fight. And it also sets you up with 27 HP going into the next fight after healing, which ends up being perfect red bar coming out of that fight for Route 3. So it's just this really cool sequence of repeated, very not risky at all red bar setups. And it only works because you start out with 31 HP.
Yeah. As a human runner, 31 HP is also really nice because it also means even if you get crit once by the Diglett or the Sandshrew, you don't have to heal in battle. You still have enough HP to make it through, assuming you don't get crit multiple times.
Yeah.
So it's just a really, really nice way to go through the fight where it's really, really hard for you to die, but also very likely that you get red bar, which saves like a ton of time during that fight.
Yeah, you could reasonably argue that this tackle could be missed, but it's so useful to take the damage so that you get back into red bar off of bide damage.
Yep.
And also, there's a not quite TAS only strategy on the Geodude where you hit it in 3 shakes. Because if you get the first double kicks as a 1 in 39 roll, then it'll die in 3 shakes instead of in 4. And then taking the 18 roll there puts us at 5 HP. And then this is the other thing that we changed when we did the second passive rewrite. Being at 5 HP coming out of this fight is okay, but we want to do something slightly different on Route 3 that a human would consider viable.
Yeah, like, the problem is that you're not... The first fight on Route 3 is a bug catcher with 2 Caterpies and a Weedle. And the issue is you're not guaranteed to one-shot all of them. Like, you need to crit or have like a ton of badge boosts to kill them, so you're likely to take damage. So even if you have, let's say, 3 HP entering the fight, even though it is red bar, most humans would heal out of it because you're just so likely to take damage and you're just gonna die. It's not really worth killing your run on like a less than 50% chance that you get like string shot fails or something like that. So
yeah, so going
having 5 HP is really nice because you survive tackles, and then even if you do get tackled in battle, you can always react and sort of heal as necessary.
Yeah, so this way, being at 5 and then taking only 3 damage, now we survive a Poison Sting on this Weedle, so we would not heal as a human. And then also here, critting the Weedle and going to 4 on the level up, now we would not heal on this Caterpie.
Yeah, because the Caterpie only does 3 damage, and at this point we outspeed. Even if we didn't crit it there, Tackle would have only done 3 damage and we would have lived through the fight, so... It's a lot more human viable to have 5 HP entering and play like this, and it's not unreasonable to not heal, because the chance of you dying is pretty low, which is really nice.
And then from here, this is just generally something that's also done by human runners. If you have red bar in this fight, it's so valuable that they just risk, they're willing to risk the run still at this point to maintain red bar. Because you can get quick attacked by the Rattata. And so now we red barred level 15. It will red bar, I think, the level up to level 16. And then we won't have red bar, though, once we're Nidorino.
That sounds right.
But this whole Route 3 is amazing from a theory task perspective, because with the ability to control crits, you can get so many beneficial crits, and then you can also get this beneficial non-crit range on the Caterpie.
Yep. Because crits produce the extra text box where it says, like, a critical hit, we want to try to avoid those when we can kill without critting. So that Caterpie is actually, it only dies to the maximum roll of a non-critical, and that's faster than just critting it and getting the extra text box, even though both of them die in one turn. So it's pretty interesting how, like, the Weedle and the Caterpie, we just don't crit and we just get the ranges. But, like, the Cocoon and Metapod, we're forced to crit it because that's the only way it's going to die in one turn.
Yeah. It won't die in one critical pack, so we have to do 2 non-critical packs.
Man, we have so many horn attacks left. It's kind of crazy.
Yeah, if you have one more than this, then you can even consider center skipping. But I don't know. Can you center skip and still do the movement nip? Like, does the movement nip still work?
You need to deposit Pikachu. The issue is, I don't think center skipping is viable unless you get Mega Punch, because you just need all the horn attacks you can for
Yeah, you
the
need
2
like
fights
6
inside
of
the
them,
moon.
right?
Um, if you crit the Grimer, it's one for Grimer, one for Voltorb. I guess like one for coughing if you crit and double kick it. So I think you can get away with like 5 maybe if you crit everything, but it's just not something a human would ever go for.
Yeah. Well, before we had Manip, center skip was like a consideration in all of the like different strategies that you might use on a given run, and I think the cutoff was like 5 because there's a pattern of tackles you can use without losing turns.
So then would you just take the center immediately when you get into Cerulean?
Yeah.
Okay. Oh, okay, and then I see, and then you could theoretically skip the center after Bill instead.
Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah.
Yeah, I think I could.
There was a whole thing with so it was originally center skip because the worst Nidos would center in pewter, and then so it was double center skip already by the time we were considering skipping the moon center, and so then there's a triple center skip strategy with Mega Punch.
Yep.
But here's another example of the RNG manipulation hard reset. So when we got to Moon, we saved on a specific tile, reset the game, and then on all of the different IGT values, except for just a couple of exceptions, walking in the specific path and using the specific combination of A presses gets us through Moon and all the way to the end. With a Moonstone and a rare candy.
Yep.
Which we would not get the rare candy. We do get the Moonstone, because Nidoking is so insane. But we would not get the rare candy in full TAS, because you just don't need the levels. Like, you get literally 0 turns out of the levels.
Because you're either critting everything or it just doesn't matter.
Yeah. Yeah, and it's not like you need more levels to not die to anything either.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah, so this Grimer actually can't die to a Horn Attack crit, which is why we have to kill it in 2 Horn Attacks instead of trying to crit it and go for a one-shot.
Yeah, it's deceptive because it looks like you can do a lot more than half damage, but you don't actually do double damage with crits in Gen 1, you do double your level in the calculation. So the level doubling only does like 50% more damage in the beginning of the game, and it scales up to doing closer to double damage by the time you hit level 50. So at this point, it's doing something like 60% extra damage. Oh, so I should have mentioned the Nido time was 7:04, right? The Brock split was 14:13. I think the world record Brock split like a low 15, right?
Yeah, like a 15:57, I think.
I think it's got to be lower than that, right?
I don't think so. It wasn't like a fantastic rock time.
Oh, sorry. I meant like the best Brock split ever, not like the Brock split in the world record.
I think
the one in the world
like
record is 15:57.
I want to say like it's close to like 15:20. There might be one that's faster, but I think that's the one that I'm aware of.
Yeah. So we're tracking like about a minute ahead to that point, but then the Route 3 with all those criticals and things is so insane that we end up closer to probably like 2 minutes over where the top runs end up as humans, because we're at 1858 entering Moon, and I think most of the top runs enter Moon around the 21-minute mark.
It's either like mid 21 is like really really good, and the average is probably like 22, like 22 flat,
Because your Moon splits in RTA are almost always like the 445 mark, because there's not much variation that can happen. Like the most that'll happen is you get an encounter between the nerd and Jesse and James usually, or if you get wrapped, you could lose a couple seconds. So usually you'd enter at like 21:30 and leave at like 26:15, 26:30, or you would enter at 22 and leave around 27 on a bad run. Which is crazy because I can remember when 27 Moon was like the god time.
The 27 flat is still pretty good. You can easily get like 154 times with it. It's just doesn't mean you had like a fantastic early game. It just means you had a decent one.
Then we end up exiting Moon at 23:19, where that's like almost 3 minutes ahead of a perfect run.
Yep.
It's really just because each perfect split stacking up is so far ahead. Like, the world record might have a couple splits near perfect, whereas this is getting every split perfect.
Yeah, and especially with the early game having the most RNG heavy splits, it makes sense that it saves the most time early.
Yeah. So what you saw here was, on this section, you would not generally hear a lot of red bar if you get it, but it's very rare to get it this early. That's what's so crazy about the theory section of this run, is you wouldn't normally get red bar this early. But if you get it exactly to 4 here, you would not heal for the next fight, because you can only take 3 from the Caterpie. And it happens that the fastest way possible, thinking through all the theory of it, is if you were to get sand attacked by the Sandshrew, then the Hyper Fang, then you might miss double kicking the Rattata and have an opportunity to Hyper Fang you, where it could Hyper Fang crit, and then in 3 turns of missing, put you into red bar very quickly. And then we don't actually get tackled here. We could theoretically critical the Caterpie, and now we're at 7, and we don't have to heal still because a quick attack from the Pidgey would not kill us.
Yeah, I think it does like 5 without critting, so even though you do die to a crit here, most human runners don't play around crits. It's just a little bit too safe if you try to heal here. The chance of dying is not high enough for you to really worth playing around.
Yeah, you might. You'd probably heal if you did get quick attacked, but then if you don't get quick attacked, then you're fine on the Nidoran.
Yep.
And now here the Horn Attack can crit and kill the Nidoran female, so... And then, interestingly, this bridge time is not that much faster than like a perfect bridge split. It's a 6:27, which is only like 2 seconds faster than one of the fastest bridge times known. But because it has all that time lost to get red bar, you then get a ridiculous Misty split, because you get all the crits you need on the Misty split, you don't have any weird extra text boxes with critting that you don't need to, and you're in red bar.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, unfortunately there's only one level up that happens on the Misty split that really takes advantage of red bar, but red bar also saves time on every single text box. It saves time when Pokemon faint and get switched out. It saves a little bit of time there, so the obvious ones are getting the jingle skips in red bar, but it just saves time everywhere when you're in it, so it is still worth having.
Yeah. Though with candying for the Thrash there, it's slightly annoying that you have to get quick attacked to maintain the red bar. And then we switched Thrash into slot 1 because swapping moves actually can be done very quickly and without losing any time over the theory tasks. Like, you have like 7 or 8 frame windows to buffer all of the select presses. And then it's 7 frames saved every time you have to use a move from slot 1 versus slot 2.
And we end up using Thrash a ton over the next few splits, so it does definitely pay off.
Yeah, massively stacks up on Thrash. And you can see some more jingle holds there in the input window that's scrolling by. That's one of the things I'm really excited for about this video is, like, new runners could watch it and instantly see every place where you can buffer an input.
Good example is buffering this A into fight here. You can see A being held.
Yeah, whenever there's an entrance to a fight, you can hold A to enter the fight menu on the opposing Pokemon's cry. Or is it Nido's cry?
It's Nido's cry.
I think, yeah, I got it backwards. It's Nido's cry. So this bridge split would be 29:46, and that's starting to get pretty crazy. I think the fastest one's around the 34 mark these days.
It's not uncommon to get like mid 33s on pretty good paces. I don't know if anyone's ever gotten a 32, but like low 33s are definitely they've been achieved for sure.
Cool.
But this is still what, like 4 minutes, 3.5 minutes faster than that, which is pretty absurd.
Yeah. This is one interesting place that's really different in the full TAS, because the full TAS does Misty before the bridge, and so you'd have Bubble Beam, and you wouldn't need to crit the Onyx. But in a Theory TAS, you're doing Misty after the bridge, so you're on Bubble Beam, so you have to double kick that Onyx. But Theory TAS also has the possibility to crit the Onyx, so it just kills it in 2 double kick shakes.
Yep.
And that happens relatively often in human runs, because now that you have Nidoking, crits are a 1 in 6, and it's really not that uncommon to see them. It ends up stacking up probably a pretty substantial amount of the time save versus world record just in being able to control not getting excess text boxes to critting things that don't matter.
Yep. Because I think like every crit text box, it's a little bit less than a second. I think it's like maybe 0.7 or 8 seconds to clear it perfectly. So it definitely adds up just to control not critting. Which does happen a lot over, like you said, like a normal run. You're getting crits everywhere because Nidoking is fairly fast, and Gen 1 crit is based on your Pokemon's base speed instead of a static, like 1 out of 16. Yeah, so on the rest of this route, there are a few Pokemon that can use Quick Attack, but you're at basically no risk of dying. Like the Quick Attack rolls are like maybe 5 or 6 max, not including crits, and we're at, I think, like 14, so it's very, very safe here.
Hey, Squid. Yeah, Thrash plus Red Bar starts to get into the insanity that the full TAS would have too. I think one of the cleanups I still need to do with the full TAS is I think it uses the with the ether before Bill's house here, and needs to get the max elixir on Cycling Road instead.
Oh, you're saying you want to switch it to get the Cycling Road max elixir instead of the ether?
Yeah, because then you don't have it in your bag for all the space
Yeah.
between now and the fly split. I can't remember if I already fixed that or if I still need to fix that, though. But I remember that Ether's been a routing consideration in red often.
Yeah, I think the current RTA route in red does get the Ether. There's like 2 different route variations right now for the world record route in red. One of them gets like the Ether, and one of them gets the max Ether outside of Rock Tunnel. And they're almost interchangeable. It's just some menu differences in between with the items in your slot.
So this is a great place to watch the input viewer, because you can see holding A there. That's very important to hold A during that last text box of the center menu.
You can also hold B as well, but yeah. It's just holding a button it reduces some lag or delay from the, I guess, Nurse Joy talking to you again.
Yeah. It has the same effect as like when Screeched, it does like a scroll text box. Those scroll text boxes can be accelerated by holding a button as they appear.
Yep. Or like focus energy as well. There's a similar pause.
Critting the Goldeen is always really, really nice because it has the ability to confuse you. Now, this was an interesting thing that we discovered even in the first pass, looking at the theory task, because we were considering whether it would be faster in theory to get bubble beamed to about half your health and then get mega kicked by Surge, or whether it would be faster to get criticaled by the Starmie all the way into the red bar and then ride the red bar until you need to heal for Surge, and then get mega kicked by Surge. And it turns out that the red bar is useful enough here that you would prefer to get criticaled and be in red bar between Misty and Surge, even though you have to heal it off.
Yep. And while you can theoretically go into Surge without healing, and the win rate still isn't terrible, it's just the win rate improvement by using just one potion is so big that most runners will just, if they're on really, really good pace, as this would be, they would always heal because there's no reason to risk your run off of just like a slight faster fight, basically.
Yeah. And if your healing doesn't pay off and you like are stuck out of red bar, you're not going to be stuck out of red bar very long because there's great places to fix your HP in Rock Tunnel, and you don't really mind too much having extra HP for the 4-turn Thrash fight because you can easily just get a bad fight there and hit yourself into red bar anyway.
Yep. It's actually pretty interesting that a lot of the top runs right now don't have red bar for fly. A big part of that is there's been a new fight strategy involving Misty in the center where if you have high enough HP after Bill, runners will choose to do Misty without healing and then just take the center immediately after for Surge. So that way it reduces their chance of getting red bar, but if your run is good enough to not need red bar, it vastly improves your survival chance for Surge, which is what the runner would prioritize at that point.
Yeah, you are way more likely to survive Surge, the fly split, and the tower split as a section if you heal after Misty versus before. So that really makes sense.
Yeah, so like the top 3 yellow times all have really, really decent or really, really good early games. So much so that they don't really risk the fly red bar, and they just go through and they have good enough times to still get top times without that extra like 20 seconds that fly red bar can save.
Yeah, but the theory of this section here really is, if you were to get red bar before Misty, you would need to heal it off, and then you would end up doing the center before Misty, and then you have, because you've done that, you then push Misty to, well, you could either get really low damage or get damage all the way to red bar, and then you prefer the red bar, and then it just kind of like shifts over. Whereas if we did it on bridge where we didn't get damaged at all, then it would shift like you're saying, and that would be a lot more common.
Yep.
I think, to see from a top run. With very little damage, you could then just shift the center to after Misty, and then you would prefer not to get damaged.
Yep.
That Raticate's really useful in the full TAS because you can do so much damage with its quick attack. I think in the Japanese TAS that I based a lot of my full TASing off of, they had taken damage 3 times between the bridge and the tower heal pad, and I was able to pull it down to 2 times by adjusting where we take quick attack damage.
So getting it from the Eradicate there is more effective, you're saying?
Yeah.
Yeah.
That's a great example here. I don't think we talked about it in the Moonstone use, but that menu is a great example of using double inputs in a way that is human viable. So what happens is when you hold the down button, if you do things wrong, you can either get a wind up where it's like waiting to go down and then goes down slowly, or you can avoid the wind up but lose a couple of frames because the game has to like wait a frame of pretending that the down button isn't being pressed and then reapply down. If you instead press left and right on that frame, or hold left and right before that frame, then the game can realize that something has changed with your inputs and not have this consecutive input lag stack up. The same problem applies in like the fight menu. So you have to hold A to open the fight menu, and then you end up having to time A because you've held A to open fight, and then you get consecutive input lag, where it can't know that you're pressing A if you've just pressed A.
Yep. Here's another example of us swapping moves. We swapped double kick to slot 3 and double beam to slot 4. And that's because we want to keep Bubble Beam for now, but we're getting rid of double kick soon and teaching over it with Thunderbolt. So we want that to be slightly higher in our menu so that we save an input when we're teaching it in slot 3 over slot 4.
Yep.
And it ends up being worth it in the long run.
Yeah, it's a complicated series of adjustments because it saves time both in that one swap there, but then also we need to switch Thrash into slot 4 to be able to keep it for later in the run. Mm-hmm. We wouldn't want to write over Thrash in slot 1 at the fly menu. So we would then swap Thrash and Bubble Beam, and then we can overwrite Double Kick in 3 and overwrite Bubble Beam in 1, and have Rock Slide, a Horn Drill, Thunderbolt, Bubble Beam.
Yep.
Hey Thunder. We are playing back the theory task right now, so we're about to the Surge split now. We passed the Misty split. What did I have? Oh, yes. The Misty time was a 35:43. With a 5:57 Misty split.
Sub 6 Misty.
Yes. I know, Hwang, when we talked about this the first time, you noted that we are getting the bike voucher after Surge, and that's because there's this really interesting problem with human runs where you want to minimize the amount of time lost to resetting, right? You wouldn't want to get the bike voucher and then immediately die to Surge and lose that time that you spent getting the bike voucher. So we intentionally get the bike voucher after the Surge battle to minimize the total amount of human time taken to do resets.
Yep. Because ultimately in the speedrun, it's not faster or slower to get the bike voucher before or after. It doesn't really matter at the end. If you live through Surge, you end up getting to dig back to Celadon at the same amount of time, whether you do early or late bike voucher. But as a human doing runs where Surge is a pretty big reset point, you want to move that reset point as early as possible. So
this fight is pretty difficult to manipulate here because you have to manipulate the growl fail at the same point that you're manipulating the damage roll for how much your Thrash does. And Thrash killing Raichu in 2 turns is actually slightly difficult. It does happen in RTA runs, but not very commonly.
Yep. Yeah, but we did manipulate, I think it was a Mega Kick from Raichu into Red Bar again, and we're going to keep this Red Bar until we have to take a forced heal at the Pokemon Tower.
Yes. Not quite forced, but effectively forced.
Might as well be forced.
Yes. Because the only way to get around the heal pad is to fight a Haunter, and it's not a great fight.
Yep. And then you also need the Hwangbros again for Jesse and James afterwards. Yeah, so in Yellow we actually have to walk to Diglett's Cave in order to use Dig. We can't just dig out of the house like we can in Red.
Mm-hmm. And we used the Mart before Surge because selling the items makes some of the menus shorter, right?
Yep. So by getting rid of the Nugget and the TM, when we end up teaching like Bubble Beam or Dig or Cut, those are higher up in our menu with the absence of those 2 items that we sold.
And then in that menu, in that bike shop room there, we had to manipulate the girl to walk down before we got into the shop. Whereas a human run would have no control of where she walked, and a human run might have to like walk up and not be able to buffer talking to the bike voucher guy.
Yeah, it's like a little thing that saves, I think like theoretically it saves like 2 frames, probably more depending on how well you can talk to the guy without bonking or without a buffering, but it's still really nice to see in a run. It's just sort of like a good omen when the girl goes down.
Yeah. You have to hit A literally 2 frames after the right button. So, it's pretty precise.
Yeah, so this is the only fight, I think, in the entire game where we actually need to hit a 4-turn Thrash, or we rely on getting a 4-turn Thrash hit.
Yeah, this fight is terrible, because there's no way to one-shot the first Pokemon except using Thrash, and so you have to use Thrash, and then you're stuck into thrashing the whole fight. If you were to not one-shot it, like for instance choose to try to Horn Attack it, so you didn't have to worry about 4-turn Thrash, then you can get paralyzed or put to sleep by the Oddish.
It's really, really terrible.
Yeah.
Like for Thrash, it's 50% to either go 3 turns or 4 turns, and then if it does go 3 turns and you're confused, it's another 50% on whether or not you hit yourself. So realistically, there's like a 25% chance to get the 3-turn Thrash and then hit yourself in confusion, and if you're low HP, you just die. But that's still pretty decent odds of living, it's just sort of nothing we can really do to route around it. It's just sort of a forced part of the run.
You can make yourself not instantly die to it by being at higher HP going into the fight, but then you have the problem of it, like all the scenarios where you don't instantly die are very terrible. And then anybody watching this in the VOD, I highly recommend slowing down and watching that Repel at quarter speed, because it is so beautiful. The buffered inputs, and I think there's only like 1 or 2 timed inputs in the whole menu to use Repel, are so clean when you do it perfectly, and it's one of my favorite things to do in the human run.
Yep. Yeah, I think there's only like 2 timed inputs compared to like 8 or 9 buffered inputs. It's really, really fast when you do it correctly.
the idea is that you can buffer the start press to open the menu, and then from there you can buffer opening the item bag, and then reapply A with holding B to select Repel. Then you have a timed input to actually use the Repel, but then after that you have buffered inputs to close the Repel text box, and then direction to close the item bag, and then you buffer the start press to close the menu again.
Yep. Yeah, so I think almost every time we use a Repel or Super Repel, we want to be doing similar buffers to that, where we just buffer opening the bag, use the Repel, and then instantly closing the bag again.
Yeah. It's a slightly more complex version of the same buffers used for getting on the bicycle frame perfectly. You just have to close the menu manually.
Yeah, no, we didn't talk about that fight, but the fight we just saw with the Oddish and Bulbasaur is one of the scariest fights.
Yes.
The Oddish and Bulbasaur in the TAS, they just died to Thrash normally, and sometimes you don't think that's notable, but both of them are actually ranges. I think the Oddish is like a 45% range to die, which is really, really terrible. And it has moves like Stun Spore, it has Sleep Powder. It's just really, really annoying when you just want to get through the fight and you're just really hoping the Oddish dies, and it lives at 1 or 2 HP and Stun Spores, and it's just really terrible. Yeah, so if everything goes perfectly, the fight just looks normal. You just thrash and win, but it doesn't always end up that way.
Yeah, it will often look like that in a human run, but it is very scary because there's a good chance that you don't get the Oddish range, and then there's a slight chance that you don't get the Bulbasaur range.
Yep.
It's not the Goddish that Gunnar had in the GTQ run. It's the opposite.
Yeah, so other than the 4-turn Thrash Girl at the beginning and the Oddish Girl in the Rock Tunnel, the rest of the fights are basically free. We either use moves like Bubble Beam or Thunder Bolt on the Cubone or Slowpokes, or just thrash everything else, and it's just everything dies in one hit, so it's a relatively easy rest of the split in terms of the fights go. So here is, I think, the last move swap we do in the game, where we swap Bubble Beam to slot 1 and Thrash to slot 4, because we want to teach Rock Slide and get rid of Bubble Beam. And it's faster to teach moves in slot 1 and also use Rock Slide in slot 1, and we want to still keep Thrash for one more fight in the mid game.
We got top elixir coming up here. This is a strat used by human runners. The idea is that you count the number of bike pedals while you are underground. You have to anyway, because you have to be able to pick up the elixir, and you need to know where it is. The only way to know where it is to count how far you've biked. And because you're already doing that, you can then make use of the strategy where you get the elixir from the top instead of from the side, and it allows you to then exit the room from the top and be facing down, so that you never have to turn in that next little gatehouse, which saves 2 frames.
Yep. Counting bike pedals is, I think the most reliable way to do it, but you can also use audio cues as well. There's pretty good ones in terms of like the bike song. Yeah, watching this TAS shop is just, I'm always amazed when I see it. Like when you see the task scroll to buy the X items, particularly when it buys 11x accuracies, it goes to 11 so fast. It's
This one goes to 11. And then also in TAS, we manipulate the girl to walk either right or up. In this case, right, but up also will save time. And that allows you to not have to walk as far to get to her and be able to buffer talking to her. And then you have to get the fresh water. You do that the second pass. I think it's part of like ordering the items in your bag.
Yep. Since we don't really use the fresh water, but we do teach both. We did teach rock slide right away. It's better to have the fresh water lower in your bag as part of that. Yeah, watching these scrolls is man.
Yeah, what I would give to be able to menu like that. It's like the devil and the guitar lessons. Except I need Pokemon menuing lessons. And then you can enter that gatehouse on the bottom tile and automatically be transported to the top tile to walk around the dude. And then it's... Because your cursor will move from Pokemon to items when you do that menu to get on the bicycle, it is actually faster to bike to the house here. Because you'd have to use that button anyway to get to the items to do this menu.
Mm-hmm.
Otherwise, it's extremely close whether or not you would bike to the fly house or not, and it would be potentially slower as a human because you might miss a couple of frames.
So on the first menu, the first real big menu of the run, we teach a couple moves, swap some of our important items up. A lot of this is actually human viable. I think the text boxes are probably the hardest to get, but in terms of like the buffering, the fast scrolling, the swapping, that's all. You can't really get faster than what a human would normally do at the top level. It's all just, going down as fast as possible by holding down and swapping at the right times. So
yeah, like that menu probably looks a slightly cleaner than a top level menu just because you do have some timed inputs whenever you're using items. But yes, at the same time, those menus have to be practiced extensively for anybody trying to go to world record. And with the level of practice they're doing for those menus, you're not going to have much of a difference between a perfect menu and a human menu at that point.
yeah. So for the earlier splits of the run, like Forest, Brock, Route 3, this task saved like upwards of minutes over like the top human runners, but now it's going to be dramatically less because it gets down to more execution stuff like this. And at this point, you're just saving maybe like frames on text boxes or timed inputs, and you're not saving as much time to RNG compared to like the best gold splits of humans. So
Yeah.
It should start to slow down a little bit versus humans, but not too much. It's still beating humans by every split.
Yeah, the fly split of this task is in around the 1058 level. Let me just move something over a second. If I take this, it's exactly 1059 now in this run, and the fly time is 54 minutes. I think the top runs are around the hour and 1 minute mark, would you say?
It's like less than that, maybe like between an hour flat and an hour 30 is what normally what you want to go for. There's been a couple runners, I know Wave and Pokeguy both had a couple like high 59-minute fly splits, which is really insane, but
Yeah.
You normally don't want to have 101 flutes or flies. You want to have something like around an hour 20 or an hour 30 maybe.
Gotcha. Going for world
or
record.
faster.
That makes sense.
Yeah.
So that's about 5 minutes behind. But the flute split here is going to be a 6:10, and I don't think that's too much faster than a human flute split. Maybe 15-20 seconds at the most.
I'd be surprised if it's even that much compared to human golds.
Yeah, oh, certainly to human golds.
Yeah, but for like the world record, like I think a lot of the top times, again, they don't have red bar entering the split, so like the rival fight's gonna be probably like 5 to 10 seconds slower, and then they're gonna lose time to menus and things like that. So
Yeah, there's a 5 second, even on the second fight, because you have a level up in the middle of the second fight too.
oh yeah.
And then the full human run would have the chance to be missing Rock Slide, possibly, on a lot of these Ghastlies. There is a human strategy that uses Thunderbolt instead of buying Rock Slide and using it, but the strategy there has a slight disadvantage because if you do get paralyzed after the heal pad while Thunderbolting the Ghastlies, you have to use a full restore to get rid of it. Or backtrack to the heal pad, which is terrible.
Yeah, that's terrible. I don't think the Thunderbolt strat is viable anymore with the introduction of Ice Beam, because we have to talk to the Roof Girl anyway to get the Ice Beam TM, so it doesn't really save that much time to skip Rock Slide.
Yeah, the only way that that would really be viable is if you were to also do the Blizzard route.
Yep.
And you can see when we do X accuracy uses that there is a double input strategy for those. With holding down through the A press into the item bag, you can then buffer a left press and then time, not exactly time, but mostly time. It's like a 3 or 4 frame window, a right press to buffer to X accuracy.
Yeah. So other than getting all the Rock Slide hits, the only real places of RNG were the 2 turns of damage we took, or we let the opponent hit us with when we're setting up the X accuracies, and we manipulate, I think, like a Leer fail from the Firo.
Yeah.
And then I think we got Screech fail here.
Yeah. Maybe it was Growl fail from the Meowth.
Okay. Oh yeah, Growl fail is probably faster.
But there's not much difference, and then we'll see, again, pretty minimal stuff through a lot of the next split, similar things.
What are the odds to kill the Ghastlies with Thunderbolt? They don't die in one hit, so you need to either critical to kill them, or just really hope you don't get like Lick Paralyzed or Confuse Raid and hit yourself. So it is very much like a YOLO strategy. It's not really something that you should go for.
Yeah.
Especially on the Ice Beam route. But with the old Blizzard route, if you're really, really behind on time, it's something you can try to go for to make up a little bit of time. But it's
just like one of those things where it's one of the only ways that's possible to save time if you're really behind. So if you're behind enough, you might go for it to try to salvage a run.
Yep.
So we had a 101 flute there. This is something we're doing because of the theory TAS. If somebody is watching this and is familiar with the full TAS, they would be like, what are you doing getting the stuff in this room? Well, as a human runner, you need Earthquake to beat the champion. Almost primarily, exclusively, you need it for the champion. You can also use it on Agatha, but you could theoretically get Fissure and do Agatha with Fissure even as a human. Like the full TAS. But you really need Earthquake for the champion fight as a human, because there's no way to set up Fissuring Alakazam and kill the Sand Slash at the same time. Hey, Daniel. So you've got to get Earthquake so that you can set up to be able to kill the Sand Slash. And then just flat Earthquake Alakazam.
Also short term, we also need that experience to outspeed the Kadabra in the coming Silph rival fight. Like, we barely get level 34 for this after this Arbok, and we candy twice to 36. So if we didn't have the Machoke experience, we wouldn't have enough experience to get to level 36 for the Kadabra, and we would get outsped. Yeah, so that the rocket on floor 10, that's one of the few optionals that we end up fighting in yellow as part of the main route. The route differs compared to red, because in red you can actually do these fights with Horn Drill without Earthquake, and you can actually go back to the floor, to the 10th floor, and get these items without fighting the guard after you beat Giovanni.
Yeah.
But that's something that's just not really viable in yellow.
Yeah, it ends up taking so much time with like trying to thrash the Arbok, and because you don't have Earthquake yet and some other oddities, that's not really worth it.
Mm-hmm.
Though it might be worth reevaluating now that we're X-acking and drilling part of the Giovanni fight. So here you take a step up to manipulate the rival movement so that he has this really quick route out of the room straight to the teleport pad.
Yep. It's one of those things where the rival walks at a much slower speed than we do. So even though we're taking extra steps out of the way, if it saves the rival steps, that's worth it because they walk so much slower and it just ends up being faster.
Yeah. Then we play for a sand attack fail on this Sand Slash here, and now you have tons of HP for Koga.
We're actually not going to be taking damage until... Was it like Agatha, I guess?
Yeah, it's like literally Agatha.
We're not taking any damage from here, so...
Yeah. So, as a human run, you would almost certainly take some damage somewhere between the tower heal and Agatha. But when you look at every scenario individually, there are viable like human scenarios where you would not take any damage in every fight for the whole way, and then you can kind of stitch it all together for this sort of human theory run, and you just end up never taking damage at all.
Yep. So not only is it faster because taking damage and actually like seeing your HP tick down is slow, but also like not having to heal makes all the menus faster too. So it's just it's really, really fast in most cases to take no damage in yellow, which is a big difference in red, where even in like the red RTA route, you want to be in red bar as much as possible because the late game is generally more safer. And you're less likely to die, so it's safer to be in red bar and just save the time.
Yeah, your probability to finish a run of yellow playing for the like top strategy is a lot higher than in red.
Alright, the Giovanni fight coming up is something that was changed a few months ago after doing a lot of simulations of different fight strategies. The old strategy used to be we set up an X attack on the Nidorino, and then we Earthquake everything. And the main reasons why that's not being used today is because Nidorino has a chance to use Fury Attack, which is obviously really slow. It's a multi-hit move that can hit up to 5 times. And also, you don't outspeed the Persian. So if the Persian growls you before you use Earthquake, the Nidoqueen doesn't always die to Earthquake, and Nidoqueen can use Body Slam and paralyze you, so there's a lot more risk in that strat.
Yeah.
So instead, what we do now is we Earthquake the Nidorino, we set up a turn, we set up the X accuracy. We Earthquake the Persian, and this is a range to die, so it doesn't always die, but it dies like 50% of the time, and if it uses Screech, it's like guaranteed.
Yep.
And then we set up an X accuracy on the Rhyhorn and Horn Jewel the other two.
And in the Theory TAS setting, we can manipulate getting Guard Spec twice from Giovanni, which is also very fast.
Yep. Yeah. So the idea is we don't give ourselves a chance to get Theory attacked by Nidorino, and also we reduce the impact of getting growled, where if you get growled, you still one-shot the Nidoqueen at the end with Horn Drill. It doesn't really matter if you get growled. So it leads to much more favorable fights where it's a lot harder for things to go catastrophically wrong.
Yeah, yeah. And from here we have to go bike to the Koga, what is it called? Is it Fuchsia?
Yep, Safari Zone.
Yeah, so Fuchsia in the Safari Zone.
Yeah, so as a human, depending on how much damage you took in Silph Co, this is where you would most likely Super Potion to heal for Koga, because Koga has the potential to do a lot of damage. But since we're at full HP, you skip the heal, which is what runners do anyway if they're at full HP. So it's just another bit of time save.
Yeah.
This is where we'd see it.
In this fight here is the only place in the Theory TAS where you get to see the downright buffer that you can do as a human to buffer running away from wild encounters.
Yeah, that's the only encounter that you don't manip.
Yeah. Yeah, the technique that you were talking about with simulations, it's called Monte Carlo simulation, and it's used primarily in environments where you aren't able to mathematically calculate the exact frequency and value of different strategies. And so instead of trying to calculate that, you simply run simulations of the outcome repeatedly. It was kind of like the precursor to a lot of the current things being done with AI in a lot of research environments, because a program could theoretically do a Monte Carlo simulation of using a lot of different moves, for instance in chess, and then pick the move that has the most success. So that's really what we've done in regards to the Giovanni fight, is we did a Monte Carlo simulation of the fight with a lot of different strategies, and are now picking a strategy that has the highest odds of success and speed.
And there's a couple different places where we've been able to do that with different fights and find slightly better strategies for them for a human. So one of those is like the Blaine fight, which got a lot safer. We'll talk about that more when we get there, but yeah, it is very useful because it's very hard to simulate, or very hard to calculate exact probabilities when there's so many different variables in every fight.
Yeah, one thing I want to mention quick here is, so in that last Repel menu we did something very specific. We used the up button to buffer closing the item menu, because it invisibly moves our cursor back from Repel to the bicycle, so that when we need to use the bicycle again on our way to Sabrina, we don't have to move our cursor from Repel to bicycle.
Yeah, so basically it's a way of moving our cursor up or down a slot without the time it takes to actually move the cursor. It's very, very useful here.
Yep.
Yeah, so you'll see, like, when we open our bag to bike to Sabrina, it's already on bike, and we can just go right away.
Yep. And it gets incorporated into the strategy that's already being used to buffer using the bike frame perfectly.
And then just a fun fact, Sabrina is probably the only fight in the game where it's, if you don't use the wrong move, it's impossible to lose.
Yes.
We set up an X speed and X accuracy on an Abra that can only use flash or X defend, and then we earthquake and horn drill everything, and it's all guaranteed. You can't Gen 1 miss, crits don't matter, it's just unless you do the wrong move, you're not going to lose to Sabrina, so it's a very nice...
Yeah. Flash fail is the fastest thing that Abra can do, and then, yeah, specifically, the X accuracy removes the ability of Gen 1 misses to happen, because X accuracy in Gen 1 removes the concept of accuracy from the game. For you, not your opponent.
Yeah.
And now, with the routing here, this is one of the things that I routed back in the day, is by moving Sabrina before Koga, which you're able to do because you moved up rare candies to the Silph split and Carbos use, and so you're able to X-speed and outspeed the Alakazam. You've also gotten all this extra experience by early candying, and then also with moving Sabrina before Koga. That experience gets you to level 40 here, and then level 40 allows you to thrash the 3 remaining pokes after the first poke on this juggler. And then also, just quickly, the bicycle there to Koga is something done frequently by human runners, but I would not generally suggest new people to do that, because it is only 2 frames faster than walking, and you're likely to lose 2 frames trying to do the inputs perfectly versus just walking.
Yep. But yeah, this is the only reason we kept Thrash for this long, is just for this fight specifically. We can Thrash the Pokemon without using Earthquake PP, which is more valuable, and Thrash is just faster than using Earthquake if you're doing it over several turns.
Yeah, it saves 2 Earthquake PP, and it's 2 seconds faster. Then here, this fight can be somewhat scary as a human, because the Hypno cannot be killed in one shot, even with Earthquake, even with our stab 100 power move. So Hypno has a chance to use some annoying moves like Confusion. He doesn't usually use Confusion, it's because it's only 1 in 4, but if he does and crits it, then it can be bad news bears.
Yeah, like normally you're not at HPs where you can die to Confusion hit, but it'll just mean that you have to heal again before Koga, which is slow, because you have to open up your menu just to heal and you can't really do anything else. So critting it is obviously the best case, but Hypno also has moves like Poison Gas, Disable, and Headbutt, which are generally fine. They don't really change the outcome. It's just a little bit slower than critting because you just take the extra turn. Yeah, entering Koga, this first Venonat is really, really troll because it has Sleep Powder. And thankfully it misses here, but if it hits, it's just really bad because you're likely to either have to use your Pokefleet to wake up or a full restore, and it just makes the fight a lot slower than it has to be.
Yep.
So we get Sleep Powder fail into X attack. Koga can actually use an X attack for every Pokemon that he has, but X attack is slower than the Sleep Powder fail, which is why we didn't manipulate it for the first one.
Yep, we even use that first Sleep Powder fail in the full TAS, but we don't need to manipulate X accuracy in the full TAS. So that's also backwards. So in the full TAS, we'll X speed first because we don't need X accuracy. But in the human TAS, you want to X ac first so that you can quickly drill the first Venonat and then use X speed to get around the Venomoth speed on the second Pokemon. Because the second Venonat does not have Sleep Powder.
Yep.
Then you have to get on the bicycle here because you gotta go a little bit further to the Warden's house to give him his gold teeth.
I just saw that we just bonked on the door.
What?
Exiting Koga, we bonked on the way out
Oh,
on the door.
did I not fix that one? I probably did.
Yeah.
There's a thing that Hwangbro has been teaching me, which is that you want to leave rooms by going, like, you don't want to be turning on the frame that you leave a door, because you will bonk on the door as you leave it. And I cleaned that up in 2 other places in the TAS, but I did not at the Koga run.
Yeah, that's something I see a lot of newer runners do just because they're not aware that it exists. It only loses like 2 frames when you do it, but if it's something that is really easy to fix, there's no reason to not switch to it.
Yeah. And then here, the theory task manipulates the girl to walk up when you fly to Pallet Town so that you can walk perfectly to the water.
Yeah, so at the end of the Koga menu, what happens is that the last thing we did was we used the rare candy on Nidoking, and then we flew to Pallet Town. When you use the rare candy, it resets your cursor back to bike. But again, when we closed the menu to go to fly to Pallet Town, we buffered a down press so that when we use the Repel in Pokemon Mansion, our cursor inside our bag is already on Repel instead of bike, so it saves us an extra input here.
Yep.
And then we actually do the same trick again when after we use the Repel, we buffer up when we close the bag, and that puts our cursor on bike when we bike to Blaine after we get out. So it's just a couple of small tricks that they're not as intuitive to really see, but it's really interesting to see the inputs and see how you can save inputs this way without really being obvious about it.
Yep. And we grab the Carbos here to fix bag slots from having just taught Ice Beam, right?
Yeah, we taught Ice Beam and used the rare candy, and then we need to fill those slots up again. So we fill it with the Carbos and the secret key.
And we also need that Carbos now in the current route for the champion fight, right? Because on the old Blizzard route, if you were to X-spec and get rid of the ranges on the Sand Slash, you would also be not helping your speed enough, and you'd be speed tying the Alakazam. But now with X-specking, which you'd have to do, there's no ranges even, you have to X-spec to be able to kill the Sand Slash with Ice Beam. You then really need to not be speed tying the Alakazam, so you have to get a Carbos to get enough speed to get around that. And you'd rather do that than get a rare candy, because the only way to get enough experience to do better than level 43 without messing up leveling points, like the way that your experience is routed is very, very precise, because you need to level at the end of every fight so that you don't level during the next fight. And doing that on every single fight through the end game is very complicated. It requires spreadsheets and or Poke Router, the Gen 1 routing tool.
Yeah, and the reason why leveling up in the middle of the fight is really bad, and I don't know if we've talked about this yet, is because of badge boosts. So there's certain badges in the game that give you certain boosts to your stats. So for example, Brock, after you beat Brock, he gives you a badge boost for attack. So that means your attack is passively boosted by like 12%. But the thing is, the way Gen 1 is coded, every time you use something like an X speed or an X special, every time your stats are modified, it recalculates your stats and it reapplies another badge boost.
Yep. The practical upshot being that if you use an X attack, you get a 9/8 boost to your speed, special, and defense.
Yep. But the problem is when you level up, your stats are recalculated, and those badge boosts,
back from the
ones
base
that are
values.
reapplied, go away. So yeah. So we really don't want to level up in the middle of fights when we are trying to take advantage of those extra badge boosts that we're getting from using X items. Yeah, so this is the fight that changed as well. We used to X attack on the Ninetales and then Earthquake all 3 Pokemon, but we moved the X attack to use on Rapidash instead. And that's because Rapidash is much less likely to kill you than Ninetales is. Ninetales has Quick Attack, which is pretty harmless, but it also has Flamethrower and Confuse Ray, which are both really, really terrifying.
Yeah. And
whereas
what happens
Rapidash,
if you just don't use X attack?
you're not guaranteed to kill the Arcanine, and also you're slower than the Rapidash. You need the speed from the X attack. Yeah.
So, a couple problems there that require using the X attack, and then you have to do it on either the first or second poke. So.
Yep.
So then, yeah, once you dig out of Blaine, because you can still dig out of Blaine in yellow, you go back to Celadon, which is perfect because we still need to do the Erika fight. But now we've taught Ice Beam, so it's perfect for killing Erika. And we don't need to use X-Spec. This is another part of why it's so great to route the experience in this way. By pushing Erika after the mansion and putting the experience in that section, it solves some leveling breakpoints, but also means that you don't need to use an X special to have enough special to kill all of Erika's Pokemon.
Yep, and that's because Blaine, his badge gives you the special badge boost. So after Blaine, he gives you a passive 12% boost to your special, which is enough to kill Erika's Pokemon with Ice Beam. So I think this split might be the one that's closest in terms of human versus TAS, because there's not as much menuing going on. There's only 2 fights where you're using Ice Beam. I think what is the TAS split for this?
Yeah, so
the segment is like 202, 204.
For Erika is 203.
203, yeah. And humans can consistently get like 204. Assuming they don't like crit during the fights, so it's pretty close.
Yeah, it's actually an easier split to get close to the Theory TAS than the 1 minute Hall of Fame split, because the Hall of Fame split is so many text boxes that you have to time. I think that the world record is like 2 seconds off in the Hall of Fame and like 1 second off on Erika, which is a twice as long split.
Yeah, I think humans normally get like 105 Hall of Flame splits, and what does the TAS get? I'm assuming
it's
like
a
a 104,
but I think the world record gets a 106.
Yeah.
I could be wrong.
It's either 106 or a low 105. I don't know if anyone gets faster than that. Some of the gold Erika splits might actually be faster than the TAS, just because potential red bar setups from Blaine going into Erika.
Yes. Some of the golds in these sections here might be slightly faster depending on how healing works out. Like, if you were to heal in a previous split and then be in red bar in a split and then heal after that split, you might have a gold that's slightly faster. But
overall, it's slower.
Yeah. The overall like stretch of every split being so good in this Theory TAS is really what makes it.
Yep.
Hey Sifo. So this is the Yellow Theory TAS that we're playing back right now. So I don't know if there's any changes to talk about, but mainly just I would say that it's following the human route that you can check out on Wave Warrior's Pay Spin. So this is a completely different effort from the full TAS.
Humans are never really going to get this time because we don't have TAS execution, and some segments of RNG are just very, very unlikely to get. But this is like basically, if you follow the human route, making human decisions with basically perfect luck and TAS execution, this is the limit of this route.
Yeah. Yeah, it actually works mostly as a theory of, like, routing.
Yep.
That's
Like, I've
another
been
example
using-
of guard spec being fast.
Like, I've been using the theory task more as like seeing certain segments and comparing it to my own and seeing like how much theoretical time I can save on just like execution related splits and not necessarily to the RNG splits,
Yeah.
which is pretty useful.
Yeah, as individual splits, the theory task is quite useful. Looking at it as a whole is kind of not that useful. So, we've been talking about a lot of the split times, but also where I would usually put my timer, I have the input scroll going so that you can see the exact inputs that the task is using for different things that you might like be buffering a section. So, yeah, the Erika time, well, maybe I'll just go back and recap here. So, the last one I talked about was the flute time was a 101. Then the Sabrina split was a 13-12 with everything going on with the Silph and then Sabrina, putting us at 114-21. Then we had a 330 Koga split going to 117-51. A 544 Blaine split into a 123-36 Blaine. A 203 Erika into a 125-39 Erika time. And then this Giovanni split was a 356 Giovanni split, putting us at 129.35, which is coincidentally the Pokemon Blue full TAS's end time. But yeah, the number that you're seeing scroll by on the left is the frame count of the TAS. So if you wanted to slow down or pause at a section and see exactly when something is happening or how long a section of the run takes, you could use the frame counts for that. You just have to know that the frame rate is 59.7275 frames per second. Yeah, so at where we are right now, biking to the rival fight is, I want to say, like, around the 130 mark. Yeah, if Giovanni was 129.35, it's just, like, just after the 130 mark.
Yeah, as another indication of pace, the final time for this task is like a 146 flat.
Yeah.
And then the world record is a 135.55, so it's almost, what is it, like 8 minutes slower? Yeah.
Good thing I'm local recording because I'm dropping frames out the wazoo right now. But yeah, the main complexity with this split is the number of text boxes and the menuing involved. There's a lot of menuing with every time you have to use strength.
Yep. Like there's obviously the big menu at the very beginning where we use the carbos and swap up the X items, but also every time we use repels, strength, the rival fight as well, and the Lorelei fight, both have bits of RNG that can affect like plus or minus like 5 or 10 seconds based on what move you get.
Mm-hmm. Hold on just a second, I'm going to see if anything is going on. It's hogging up the internet. Yeah,
so one of the strats we do here is we're getting the max ether here, and we're skipping the Pokemon Center because we're at full HP. This is a strat you'd normally go for as a human if you're at HPs where you can live a hit from Bubble Beam or Aurora Beam from Lorelai's Dugong. And it doesn't save too much time, but the benefit of this strategy is that you're more likely to get red bar going into Bruno, which does save time, and just doing the strat by itself and skipping the center saves like a few seconds as well. So it's just faster to go for it if you have the HP for it, and it has the added benefit of maybe you get red bar for Bruno, which does save another couple seconds.
Alright guys, I'm going to try to reboot the stream. We'll still be live in my local recording so that we can archive the commentary. That might have been a bad plan. It seems to not be picking back up.
Uh-oh. At the same time, this is probably the best place for it just because it's pushing boulders.
Yeah. So I'll try to go live again in a minute, but the idea here with the theory TAS is mostly in making sure that we don't get any of the potential Onyx encounters from us being slightly underleveled compared to older routes, with the experience routing necessary for that really cool breakpoint with 43 out of the mansion. You do have a slight chance of getting an Onyx encounter. The trade-off being that you also don't have to pick up 2 rare candies, use them in the mansion. So
I think on average you're expected to get you're expected to get 1 Onyx on Victoria Road.
The average number is like 3/4 of an Onyx. But yeah, usually you get 1.
Yeah. It's pretty interesting that the current world record gets 2 rat encounters in Mansion and 1 Onyx in the Victoria Road. But Gunner's world record gets neither of those. So it's just pretty interesting how the time saves are distributed for the world records. I think we're back.
Awesome. So one thing that is really precisely done is the menu there where we used strength and then got back on the bike. We do that in a specific order because if you do it the other way, then your cursor goes off of Nidoking to mess with to use strength.
Yep.
Or is it our cursor goes off of Lapras to do stuff with Nidoking, and then goes back to Lapras using strength. And because we took no damage, we didn't have to use the E4 center, and we could get and use that max ether on the split there. And then we get the max ether on the Victory Road split. We use elixir, and then we max ether after this fight.
Yep.
And the fastest thing that can happen here, if you're at full, is getting rest fail from Dugong, which is is it a 33% or a 20% in yellow? I can't remember.
I think it's like a 30%.
Yeah.
Maybe close to 33, but it's not quite that much. Because the 4 moves Dugong has Rest, Aurora Beam, Bubble Beam, and Takedown. I haven't seen it, but apparently it can use Takedown at like a 1% or 2% chance. So it's roughly like 30% for each Rest, Aurora Beam, Bubble Beam, and then like a 1 or 2% for Takedown. Apparently. Yep, and then here's where we'd use the Max Ether on Hwangbro, and this is the last PP restoring item we're going to use in the rest of the route. and that's the difference with the Ice Beam route. Normally, we would need another elixir to use after Bruno for the Horn Drills to save for Champion. But thanks to Ice Beam and the fact that we're not doing Vaporeon fights anymore, we don't need all of the Horn Drills anymore.
Exactly.
So we skipped the old Blizzard route. Used to pick up the Max Ether outside of Rock Tunnel, and we can skip that because we can use one less PP restoring item here in E4.
Thunder Punch is the fastest thing that we can get from Hitmonchan, and that happens pretty often in the human runs. But Hitmonchan, setting up on Hitmonchan is also just generally very safe, because the worst thing that can happen is if it Ice Punches, and then it could have a very slight chance to freeze you.
Yep. I think Fire Punch Burn might be annoying too, but those things are so unlikely to happen.
Yeah. I wonder, if you get Fire Punch Burn, do you need to heal off the burn, or do you still just like massively overkill all of the ghosts? Because they have to have really low defense, right?
I think you probably would heal it off just because you're setting up. You basically have like 2 turns of setup in the fight if you don't one-shot the Golbat, so the burn ticks are probably just too slow.
Yeah,
you might as well just heal it off.
And then we wouldn't even theoretically need to take damage from this Gengar, because you could, in theory, have Agatha swap Gengar out to Golbat on turn 1, but it is 5 frames faster if you get licked for 10 damage versus the swap, so we do allow taking 10 damage here.
It's actually so close. I didn't think it would be that close, but swapping is generally a lot safer just because you really don't want to see Lick when you're doing this fight as a runner, because if you get Lick paralyzed, it's really, really slow. You have to full restore and heal off the paralysis, and it has another chance to use Lick or Substitute, or it's Confuse Ray even. So seeing swap is like the best thing you can see as a runner in terms of your safety, but it's 5 frames faster to get Lick, not a min roll, so that's what we go for. Yeah, and thankfully the 10 damage we take from Lick is not enough to force us to heal when we get the champion, because we have to heal in order to tank an Earthquake from Sandslash.
Yeah.
And thankfully this 10 damage is not enough to put us into the healing range needed to survive that range. So it's
by 1 point of
strat.
Damage.
Yeah, so it's like a pretty human viable strat to not heal going into the champion fight at this HP.
Yeah, there's so much stuff that's like routed so precisely. When we used to X attack to be able to Earthquake the Dragonairs here, you kill the Dragonairs by exactly the minimum amount of damage necessary to kill them with Earthquake, and then on the what's it called, the Aerodactyl with the original badge boost you have, and then the additional badge boosts from using X Special and X Attack or X Special again, regardless of which one you use, you will get exactly the speed necessary to outspeed the Aerodactyl by 1 point. Probably 2 points now that you use a second Carvos, but...
Yeah. I think with the old strat where you X Special, X Attack, and then you Thunderbolted, I think with 13 Special, that Aerodactyl is still a range too. Like, I think it's a really good range to die, but I believe that's actually still a range.
Yeah.
Which is
so like both defensively and offensively, everything is just lining up perfectly.
Yeah.
And it's really by design. Like, if it weren't, we would just get fewer levels, and then we would be doing it perfectly with fewer levels.
Yep. But yeah, I think the max roll of Earthquake here, assuming you don't crit, because crit will always kill you, is 158 at this defense DV.
Yep.
And we're at 159, which is perfect. Yeah, but if you were really close to your target pace and couldn't afford to heal, and you were like a few HP into the range of Earthquake, you would still consider like not healing because
Yeah.
depending on how far into the range you are, you're still not likely to get the max roll of Earthquake.
Yeah. If you're like 2 points in, it's like, are you going to heal over a 1 in 20 scenario at this point in the run? Probably not.
Especially if you can't afford to heal if you're that close to whatever your pace is, your target.
Yeah.
The chance of Sandslash critting is, I think it's around 12.5%.
Yeah. Because it just barely will always crit you, except for the Gen 1 miss the crit scenario, if it has the 8 times roll with Slash.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, so we actually manipulated a min roll, or as close to min roll, Earthquake, just because we still get red bar, but also ticking down for less damage means it's just faster because you're not taking as much damage for the HP to go down.
Yeah. And then Hypnosis doesn't affect... We get the Hypnosis doesn't affect text, and can use our X accuracy, so now we can X-Ac. And then this Magneton is a range Earthquaking it.
Yep, it's like a 36 out of 39 range. I think I've actually missed it like twice in some of the yellow races, but it's pretty funny.
But it's the last bad thing that can happen in the run at this point.
Yep.
And that's it. So the final splits, Lorelei is an 826 split. And then Bruno is 130, Agatha 135, Lance 146, and Champ 208. And then we have a 104 Hall of Fame. So that puts us at 145 when we beat Champ and 146.07 when we beat the Hall of Fame. Now that's by frame times though. If you do cycle timing, so you really like, if you were going by the exact times that you would hit if you like split as a human in real time on a console, the final time would be a 146 flat for this run, which, as Hwangbro said, is about 8 minutes ahead of, slightly less than 8 minutes ahead of the human time, which is a 1:53.55 right now, using the same route. Well, thank you for helping with the commentary, Hwangbro. It was really great. I think that we did a great job and got a lot of good information in there.
It's always been fun. The current route will never come close. Like, no human will ever come close to beating this theory TAS. Like,
Yeah.
I think the human limit of yellow at the moment might be, it's probably a 152, maybe a 151 if people do more extreme routes, but I don't think humans can break the 150 barrier. There's just too much RNG involved. Unless something like crazy happens in yellow, there's too much RNG involved, and the execution that's needed, it's just, I don't think it's going to happen.
Yeah, if you just look at like the early splits where it's all RNG, then by the time you get to Misty, you're already about like 3 to 4 minutes ahead. Like, we'll say 4 minutes ahead, just in RNG.
Yeah.
That you like, no human run would ever get that kind of RNG all in one run, and so you're already to 150. And then the human runs usually lose like a minute or two to execution with mashing on top of that. So really, like, the upper echelon limit of human runs right now with the current knowledge we have is a 151 to a 152.
Yeah.
And like, that's not to say that there isn't further knowledge that's possible to be obtained, because there always is. Like, things will always be improved with the Pokemon runs because there's so many people researching them, and there's so much complexity to the decision trees at every point in the run. But like, given what we know now, it is impossible to improve this.
Yeah. Like, unless something like an entirely new mechanic is found, sort of like instant text for red, that's discovered, we're not going to even come close to anything like this.
Yeah. And like I was saying earlier, it is really valuable looking at the individual splits and tracking those compared to a time that you're like if you were trying to do a run and you wanted to know where you're losing most of your time, it's pretty useful to say, okay, like let's look at this split versus the theory task. Let's look at this split versus the theory task. Whereas that might not necessarily be the same case looking at the world record, because the world record does have a lot more variance with where it's losing time.
Yep. Yeah, so like a really obvious example is like if you're a new runner and you're doing the Erika split, like there's almost no variation in the Erika split, and so you should be trying to get as close to what is like a 203 as possible. So if you're getting
Yeah.
like a 208 or a 210, you're just losing that time to execution most of the time, and you can watch this task and see like how they're buffering moves or how they're buffering the fly menus or stuff like that, and see like how where you're losing time. So stuff like that is really, really helpful for me, at least when I'm looking at certain splits. Definitely not the early ones. I think the early ones are a little bit silly, but the later ones for sure are like pretty helpful to have references for.
Hey Prado, yeah, I'm actually I can put them up on the screen here quickly before we finish the video. So we'll just do a quick screenshot here of the split and total times, and then I will save that to my downloads, and then we'll go over here, import an image into OBS, and add file. So you can see now this is the split times estimated from looking at the frame counts of the tasks, which are slightly inaccurate, but they're accurate enough for comparison purposes. And you can see the 704 Nido top times for that split have been around like the 709 to 711 mark. So human runs are probably not going to get within like 5 to 7 seconds of that time. Then the Brock split, that's where things start to get really crazy because the forest is almost always a minute and a half slower than the theory task time.
Yeah, 709 is really, really ridiculous for Brock.
Yeah. Between the possibility of encounters, the possibility of taking damage on every time where you can get string shot failed, the turns lost to missing tackles, the turns lost to being outsped, hardens, maybe even failing a manip and having to horn attack the Pidgey because you went into the fight menu instead of throwing a ball. There's so many things. The double crit that you get in theory tasks on the final Caterpie, where usually that fight takes 4 turns.
Yeah, like I think like I've done forest so many different times, just by doing attempts, and I think my gold is not even, it's like a 758 or something. It's not even close to this.
Yeah. And then it's not just the forest there, because you also have that perfect scenario with 31 HP going into Light Year Guy, getting a red bar through that fight, healing once, and then getting red bar out of Bide with the perfect turn 1 Bide on Onyx, and the 3 shake double kick on Geodude, which is very rare. And then going into Route 3, you have a 445 Route 3, which is, again, insane. You would never see that in human runs. You might see something like a minute slower than that in most runs. Then you have the 421 Moon. Usually you'll see a 445 in a human run. You do see stuff closer to the 430s in like the gold splits, but I don't think you'd ever see anything like a 421 because there are like a lot of stacking up small things going on, including the no crit 2-shot on the second coughing, and the 1 shake double kick on the Meowth when you crit it.
Yep.
Then you have the 627 bridge split, which actually is very close to what humans do, but it has that problem of it's taking extra time to get red bar, which humans almost never get. And then there's the Misty 556 Misty split, which you just... But that's crazy. You don't see a 556 Misty split. Then 814 surge. What do you think? What's a reasonable surge time?
I think Pokeguy has a really good surge split with no red bar, and he gets an 840.
Yeah.
So I think that's pretty reasonable. It just, yeah, if you have red bar, it's just so unlikely. You're so unlikely to have red bar for that split. Um, but I can see it being like maybe like an 830 for a human if you
Yeah.
get like perfect hands, maybe.
Yeah, cans being one of the biggest sources of RNG on that split, you can easily lose 30 to 40 seconds if you get bad cans. And this, we didn't talk about it, but the TAS here manipulates the can selection when it leaves the boat so that it will get the second can, because you prefer to get the second can that you check and not the first can, because the first can, its second can is really far away, and as a human, like in a run, you'd be really happy to get the first can because the second can is like almost always correct. But the fastest theoretical scenario is that you get the second can correct, and then when you're checking for your first cans, you get the second can that you check, and then the second key is right next to you. There is no cans manip in yellow. It just doesn't work at all. There's a ton of divergence almost immediately in what the cans end up being.
And I think even if there was a cans manip, on average, I think not manipping would still be faster, just because yellow cans are not that bad compared to reds.
Yeah.
Red and blues trash cans.
Yeah, I'd like to claim it's because of the Kevin can search path, but that only saved like 2 steps over the previous thing that was being done. It's really just that the yellow cans. It's really just that the yellow cans are pretty free compared to red's cans, and that you can't manip them as easily. Then yeah, you have so 1059 fly is insane. You never get that perfect red bar, and you never miss, or you never hit every range like the theory TAS would, or do all the shopping perfectly.
I think the shopping perfectly is the most insane thing, because I think a lot of runners have had like perfect red bar rock tunnels, but it's just the shopping where they probably lose the most time.
Yeah.
At least in terms of like going for like gold splits or practicing the fly splits.
Then from there you have the 610 flute, which again, there's a giant menu, but this is where things start to slow down otherwise, because the execution of the menu is really the only variance outside of like missing a rock slide or getting Fury attack from the Firo. And then from the heal pad is where things start to really slow down in variance, because you're not taking any damage. And you have the 1312 Sabrina, the 330 Koga. 330 Koga is pretty insane, I think.
Yeah. I think depending on how good your gold split is, you might beat it, but it helps that you're full HP exiting Koga, which saves, again, it saves the heal menu somewhere else.
Yeah.
Like on my spreadsheet, I have in Waves PB, he actually gets the 332 Koga because he gets Psychic Crit into Red Bar,
Yeah.
and gets the Red Bar level up after the Venomoth. So he's pretty close there, but he had to obviously full restore on the next menu, whereas we can skip that in the TAS.
Yeah. Then 544 Blaine is getting no Raticates in the mansion and doing all of the texts for the Blaine questions perfectly, getting Growl fail when it sets up X attack on the is it Ninetales?
Yeah, the Rapidash.
Rapidash, yeah, because we're sitting on Rapidash, not Ninetales. Then 203 Erika, like we've been talking about, you should be able to get almost exactly 203 Erika, maybe 204.
Yeah, 204, 205s, yeah.
And then 356 Giovanni is pretty crazy, but not that far off. 826 Lorelei is, it sounds pretty crazy, but I think people get like what, 840s, 850s as humans.
Yeah, like Wave has an 846, and a lot of that is there's a lot of variance, because if you have Red Bar entering, or if you get Red Bar from Viridian Rival that can change the fight up a little bit. Um, but if you get no onyxes, I think you should be able to get around 850 or a little bit less than that.
Yeah. Then the 130 Bruno is not too far off, probably.
Yeah, that's actually slower than a lot of like Pokeguy gets the 129, but that's because we use the max ether, which is lower in your bag than the elixir that you normally use on the route.
Oh, right, you have to go lower into the bag.
Yeah, so it's a little bit slower, but it's again like the combination of the whole route is faster because of the
Oh, right,
max
that
ether.
826 versus the 850 is largely because we're not centering. We're getting no onyxes
Yeah,
and not centering.
no onyxes and not centering. Yep.
Then there's the 135 Agatha, the 146 Lance, which is largely due to Hydro Pump missing, and not having
Yep.
to heal for it is also quite helpful. And then the 208 champ. I think, have we seen like a 209 or 211 champ in the human?
I'm actually not sure. Um, I think we probably have seen. I don't know what the best splits are for champ, but I know Pokeguys had some splits where it's healless into champ, and then it's just a normal red bar champ fight from there.
Yeah. So
Um,
they've probably been close to the 210 mark.
yeah,
So that one's not remotely inaccessible. And then the 104, there's no variance. So that wraps up
yeah,
like all of the like split descriptions and how a lot of
yeah,
those split times work. So you can see that they're now pasted onto the screen for reference of the split times.
yeah. My gold champ is actually 209, so I'm sure the other runners are about the same or faster.
Awesome. All right, well, Wave Warrior is actually online right now, so I think we should host it over to Wave Warrior and give him a shout. Thank you again, Hwangbro, and thanks to everybody watching the Theory TAS. I hope